Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know y'all with me, let's get it, baby, rockin' Royal, rockin' Navy, know you with me, let's get it, baby. Boys just came back from their mission, we going crazy. Kalani, you got no problems, you could call him Jay-Z. Best fans up in the nation since the 1980s.
Welcome back to season 2. Yeah, that's right. We got picked up for a second season of Rock and Royal Soccer here on the KSL.com podcast network. And now, drum roll, please. I guess this is the big announcement. We did a really bad job of hyping this one up, but live and in video, Rock and Royal Soccer will be live every week on YouTube, as well as your traditional audio platforms. So if you subscribe audioly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever it is, nothing will change. We'll still keep that coming in. That'll probably be the focus of this podcast. But we're going to start doing a little bit of video and doing this on YouTube. I'm your host, as always, Sean Walker, KSL.com BYU beat writer, bringing you all manner of sports with Brigham Young University, with the Cougs on campus. And joined on the soccer edition, as always, the real master of the mic, the ESPN Plus soccer analyst, former BYU women's soccer player, former, I believe she was a 7-time All-State selection at Bingham High School, still actually owns the all-time goal-scoring record in minors program history. Am I hyping you up enough? Carla Swensen-Haslam, thanks so much for being back with me for another season.
Thanks. I'm happy to be back. And I appreciate the hype. You're perhaps being a bit too generous. But that being said, I'm happy to be back and always happy to be able to talk things all Cougar soccer.
It may or may not be true, but it's now on the internet. So it's forever written in stone. It's forever written in stone once it's on the internet.
Everything on the internet is true, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. You can't. Yeah, everything on the internet is true. Just check my Wikipedia page, which I don't have. I actually make sure to delete one every time one pops up. We got to get you a Wikipedia page.
I definitely don't need one of those.
I feel like Carla Swensen-Haslam is definitely big enough to deserve a Wikipedia page. Maybe not Sean Walker over here, but Carla definitely is.
We'll agree to disagree on that one.
Daniel Haslam, definitely big enough.
There's enough pablum online that I don't think the world needs that right now.
That's fair. Maybe we'll get your better half, and by that, of course, I mean your daughter, her own Wikipedia page. You thought I was going with your husband there, but nope. Gotta pivot. Carla, let's dive right into it. Season 2 of the podcast means another season of BYU women's soccer, means another season. The 31st season, I believe, is the official number, 31 or 32.
That's right.
For Jen Rockwood in this program, which I can't believe we're getting up into those kinds of crazy numbers, but that's what happens when you have the GOAT. And BYU started the season unranked. I think a lot of us expected this to be not necessarily a rebuilding year, because I don't know if Jen ever really goes through true rebuilding years in her program. If she does, last year was maybe the closest that they came to it, and they still made the NCAA tournament. So here we are, Sean. But I think there were a lot of people that expected a little bit of a reload this year. House settlement kind of ramifications wreaked havoc on the roster. There were a lot of transfers out of the program, a lot of new faces coming into the program. 9 new freshmen joined the team this spring. 3 of them are actually starting. We'll get to some of them here a little later in the show. So definitely there was definitely a little bit of a reload feeling with this team. And I think that was validated when BYU was unranked in the initial preseason poll by the United Soccer Coaches. And yet somehow we now find ourselves covering a top 20 team only 3 games into the regular season. They definitely validated that ranking this past Saturday night. Number 19 BYU 1, number 4 UCLA 0 on South Field. Lone goal from Ellie Walbrook, making her return in a home opener after missing all of last season with an ACL injury to score the decisive penalty kick in the first half. And then Peyton Collins, the sophomore goalkeeper, making her first official home start on that field, made 3 saves to earn her first shutout. So let's start with the game, and then we'll zoom out a little bit macro. What stood out to you, Carla, about this monumental, pretty monumental win over a top 5 program in UCLA on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think back to that game, and there was a lot of things that happened. The first half is where I think BYU looked their best. In the second half, UCLA made major adjustments, and it was all UCLA. It was one-way traffic for UCLA in the second half. And so what stands out for me from this game was BYU's ability to get an early goal, take an early lead, and then absorb. And I don't say that critically. That's impressive. It's impressive to be able to absorb defensively against a very talented UCLA team. And I think that'll be important for BYU because they're going to have a lot more talented teams that they're going to be playing. They're, getting ready. They're going to take on Auburn at home, another ranked team. And then they'll play talented teams once they get into Big 12 play. And so if they can defensively stay gritty and stay resilient for a long period of time, that's only going to serve them well for the remainder of the season. And that's not to say that there aren't, still questions and still things that need to be improved upon. But if you can get a young team that can be resilient and hold on to a lead for an extended period of time, that will only serve them well as they get, deeper into the season and especially into conference play.
Yeah, the word gritty, I think, is sometimes overused a little bit in sports, especially by coaches. But this past Saturday, especially in that second half, really, I think it really fits the bill with what BYU was able to do. UCLA had a lot of the ball, 19 total shots, 13 in the second half to just 4 for BYU after the 45th minute there as well. And yet there wasn't a ton. The Bruins weren't able to necessarily do a ton with the ball in the attacking third, in that final third. They only put 3 of their shots on frame. We can argue about whether or not they could have been more clinical in front of goal. It's the second or third match of the season for UCLA as well as BYU. So that's the kind of stuff that you kind of look to maybe get a little bit more ironed out as the season progresses. And quite frankly, it's why you play games like this early in the year, in the first 10 games of the year, compared to the last 10 games of the year, right? You want to challenge yourself. You want to figure out where you are. You want to put a little bit of something on film and on paper so that your girls know what it takes to compete at the highest level when it comes to mattering most, aka, in UCLA's case, Big Ten tournament time, NCAA tournament time. They've got higher aspirations than just what they're doing in the second week of the season. I think BYU as well. Again, this has been a really good rivalry series. Jen Rockwood actually let it slip with us. Probably intentionally, because she does everything intentionally, that this series will continue into next year. BYU is going to go to UCLA, probably opening the season in a year. Certainly, it'll be the first, second, third game somewhere in there, like it's been to start non-conference play. But I think this game has been really good for both sides because you not only see 2 high-quality opponents early in the year, but both of these teams have made a habit of being available and being on the table late in the season when it comes to NCAA tournament time as well. So with that being said, I think I've given tons of flowers and tons of props for playing this game and for what this game meant to both teams. BYU just looked like they wanted this win. Like they really wanted a win over a top 5 team on South Field. There was some video that was released a little bit after the fact over the weekend of Jen talking with her team saying, this is our home. We don't lose on South Field. Whatever you do, protect South. And I think this group, 9 freshmen, 3 freshman starters, so many young players, so many newcomers, missing one of their better attacking players and Mackenzie Vance, all of those reasons aside, they really kind of took that message to heart of, hey, no matter where this team is developmentally or in terms of progression, this is still BYU soccer. This is still home field, and we need to protect home field advantage. I think that was kind of their case, and they really proved it in a lot of ways. Could you see some of that in how they played, Carla?
Yeah, I think I think back to, the match on Saturday, and the energy that I got from BYU was just a confidence. Even though a majority of the attack was in their own defensive half, and even though the possession numbers were not in their favor, the shots were not in their favor, shots on goal were not in their favor, they still felt very confident, which again, I think tells a lot. If you are playing a lot of defense, but you remain calm and composed, you're going to close out a lot of games. That's why I use the word absorb, so well. And so I think that, and a lot of that I think has to do with playing at Southfield, playing at home. A lot of it has to do with BYU's confidence. They have like a 60-something game streak where if they're leading at the half, they don't lose. And so they already have this built-in confidence, even with it being a young team, that they can hold on to leads and they can play against really competitive teams. Coach Wooden from UCLA, he used to always say you need to play quick but not in a hurry. And I felt like I saw that from BYU. I felt like they were playing quick, they were observing, they were playing good defense. They had some good offensive moments, right? They'd have a few in transition, and they were able to build a few opportunities throughout the last 45. But I never felt like they were rushed, and I never felt like they were panicked. And again, I think that says a lot, especially considering that there are young faces on the team, to not be panicked and not be rushed, even though you're playing a number 4 UCLA, even though you're playing a UCLA team that is playing pretty direct soccer, is taking you on 1v1. I mean, Lexi Wright took every player on 1v1 every time she got the ball, which is so impressive. But BYU did pretty well of holding them to that 18-yard box. UCLA didn't get a lot of chances inside the box. And that's because BYU kind of set up a wall there and they held. And so I think for me, I agree with you in that when BYU is playing at home, they look very, very confident, but it's a composed confidence.
100%. And I think composed confidence, that bleeds into my next point, was really illustrated by that first time starting goalkeeper at home, sophomore Peyton Collins, had herself a pretty remarkable night. Not a whole lot to do early on, made one save in the first half on, I think, her only touch of the first 45 minutes. But as the pressure started building and UCLA saw a little bit more of the ball, caught a couple more chances, she really made her bread and butter, I think, down the stretch. No save bigger than I think around the 85th minute when she just makes a diving save to her left to punch the ball out of the back of the net in the final clutch moments as UCLA, I won't lie, got dangerously close to an equalizer. I really thought through those final 10 minutes that this game we were going to be talking about a 1-1 draw, that both teams were going to grab a goal, split the points, walk away with a draw, a lot to learn from, a lot to like, that kind of a thing. But Peyton comes up really, really big and kind of proved, I think, in a lot of ways, why Jen went with her as the starting goalkeeper to start the year. She doesn't have the experience. She spent part of last season at UVU even. She wasn't entirely certain if she wanted to continue her soccer career after a really good prep career at Maple Mountain High School here locally. And now she finds herself probably much earlier than even she anticipated as a starting netminder for a perennial top 25 program in BYU. And I think she put her name on a lot of radars over this weekend with what she was able to do. Again, a little bit of a slow start, but when it mattered the most, she absolutely showed up.
Yeah, I agree. I think Peyton Collins has looked really good. I mean, she has let in goals, but none of the goals have been her fault. I've been looking at, I think of at Minnesota and then at Cal Poly. And then I think of even the scrimmage matches against SUU and Utah Tech. Those were defensive errors that resulted in those goals. And so I think Peyton Collins has actually been very solid. And then you're right. She had that huge save to keep the donut on the board. And I thought, she showed a lot of athleticism behind that save. But here's what impressed me even more than the actual save, as great as it was, is if we had the luxury on the broadcast of being able to see the replay. And on the replay, you see her foot skills. You see her IQ. She is preparing for that shot before it ever gets released. And that's what makes a good goalkeeper. You know, goalkeepers shouldn't be having to make huge saves all the time because that means they're usually in the wrong position. Now, sometimes they have to, right? Sometimes crazy shots come and you have to make a big save, no doubt. But if a goalkeeper is having to make crazy saves consistently, it means that she's probably not in the right position. And I think one of the reasons that Peyton Collins hasn't had to make a ton of huge saves is because her footwork leading up to a shot puts her in the right place. Her footwork leading up to a shot puts her in the position that the ball is going to go to. And so as a result, she's able to collect it. She's able to have it go to her hands. And like I said, sometimes you have to make those big saves, right? And she did it. She had that one and she did it. But what impressed me the most is her ability to read where a ball is going to be long before it is ever released. And that puts her in the right place. It allows her to organize her defense. And that just shows a smart goalkeeper. And that's something that can't be taught. You can't teach a goalkeeper to have, that sort of IQ, at least within the short amount of time that she's been there.
That's the kind of analysis and the kind of breakdown that you can only get here on the KSL.com Rock and Roll podcast. And more importantly, that you can only get from former BYU women's soccer player and ESPN Plus analyst, Carla Swensen-Haslam. A great breakdown there. I love that, Carla. I really do. Because you're absolutely right. A good goalkeeper can make the save when they're called upon. But a great goalkeeper is the one that doesn't always need to make that stellar save. They're in the right position. They know how to work their feet. They're just on top of the play as much as they can make the play. And I think Peyton has been able to be on top of her play more often than not, I'll even say, through the first 3 official games of what is technically her sophomore campaign, although it's really more like her freshman campaign. Again, I mentioned she was out of soccer for a minute, spent almost an entire year. She was at UVU. She was just working in addition to some of her college classes. And then the bug kind of catches her again. She winds up transferring to BYU. And lo and behold, here she is ready to take over in goal to start the 2025 season, which she did, not just in that shutout win over number 4 UCLA, but let's use this to pivot really quick to that first week of the season. BYU came out of the gates flying with a 3-1 win at then number 24 Minnesota. All 3 goals from a player down, all 3 goals from a goal down, all 3 goals by freshmen in this game. I think this was maybe the moment coming off of a pair of exhibition games, 4-1 win over Southern Utah, 1-1 tie with Utah Tech. I think this was the moment when not just BYU fans, but maybe even coaches, college soccer fans nationally, etc., kind of perked up a little bit and saw, oh no, maybe BYU is actually back. Maybe they're not as far down as we thought they would be. It was in that season opener on the road at Elizabeth Lyle Robbie Stadium in Minneapolis, don't you think?
Yeah. And it's so hard to start your season on the road too. And so you add that caveat to it. It makes it pretty impressive and such a great story and such a great, motivation and morale builder for this team. I think there's a lot to draw on it. It was interesting because I wasn't able to catch the first half of the game, but my phone starts blowing up with people just like texting me like, oh my gosh, are you watching this game? Are you watching it? And I was able to, run home and get the last little bit of it. But I was able to see the highlights from it afterwards and then, kind of break down the stats and everything. And it's pretty incredible, again, just how composed BYU remained, even though they found themselves down. And that's something we haven't seen a ton from BYU teams in the past because BYU teams rarely get down. And usually when they do, they, statistically tend to lose. And so that is something that's really interesting about this BYU team is that they are, again, we use the word resilient, we use the word gritty, and I would use those exact words again in their game against Minnesota because it was a team that found themselves down a player and down in the score line, but were able to just work their way through it. And, work their way through the midfield. The freshman class, I think, has been very impressive for that reason that they just don't get panicked. They just seem very experienced, even though, they're young and haven't played a lot of years. And so I agree. I think it's a good showing. It's interesting because after the Utah Tech scrimmage, And that game didn't go on the record. But after the Utah Tech scrimmage, I had people asking me, like, are you worried about this BYU team because they were unable to beat a Utah Tech team that they probably should have beaten? And my answer was no. Like, I get that the draw is not ideal for BYU, but I did not see anything in that game that worried me or that concerned me. I think, Coach Lexi at Utah Tech just played a really good game with her team, and she gets all the credit for that. But that being said, I was not worried about BYU. This is a team who you can tell mentally is in the right place. And I could see that even early on in that Utah Tech game. And so I think it's awesome that the team went into Minnesota and was able to work their way back. But I'm not surprised because mentally, I think this team's in the right headspace.
Building off of that, BYU also had another road game. We touched on it a little bit earlier. It was this past Monday night, a 2-2 draw at Big West opponent Cal Poly. I guess currently Big West moving to the part Big West, part Big Sky.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it gets really complicated when it comes to Cal Poly. It gets really complicated up there. Either way, a 2-2 draw, 2 goals from Ellie Walbrook in this one, 2 goals from the run of play, separated by just 60 seconds or so. Actually gave BYU a 2-1 lead in this one that they held for most of the game before Cal Poly came back in the second half to snatch point, I guess, if you will. Again, this was another draw that I think concerned a lot of BYU fans in a lot of way. Maybe just as concerning from an internal perspective was that Ellie Walbrook missed a penalty in this one, which is something she does not do. She's a reliable penalty kick taker. She's the Cougars' primary pen taker this season. It's kind of part of her captaincy in a lot of ways. She converted a penalty against UCLA, so obviously she learned from that moment. She told us a little bit with the media after the game. That penalty at Cal Poly, probably the last time she'll ever second guess herself from the penalty spot. Learned a lot of lessons from that and just confidently struck from the spot against the Bruins that I think kind of played into that. But Carla, what do you think it says, again, about sort of the mindset? We're talking about resilience. We're talking about grit. We're talking about mentality of this team to be able to kind of take this disappointing result at Cal Poly like that, the 2-2 draw, and bounce back in about a 5-day span against UCLA. What do you think? Take me inside, and I know you're obviously not inside the locker room anymore, but from your playing experience, what is kind of that week like in between a disappointing result and a big match like they would have had at UCLA? What can we, I guess we're kind of imagining, what can we imagine that week was like for that BYU team?
Yeah, I mean, based off how they came out against UCLA, they didn't seem too flustered by it. And I will add, just a little asterisk that tying Cal Poly, or excuse me, the loss. I mean, like that's there's no shame in that. Cal Poly is very much a black horse team in that they always come up and they always end up having a great season and they always surprise people. And it's interesting because I chatted with the UCLA coaching staff this last week in preparation for the broadcast, and they said, oh, we always have our toughest games against Cal Poly. And so they were like, we weren't surprised at all, not because, BYU played poorly or anything, but because they're like, Cal Poly just is hard. It's hard to go into their home and it's hard to beat them. They are a gritty team. They have some tricks up their sleeves. They always, I mean, again, they are one of those teams that always surprises everyone when they make deep runs and when they win big games and they beat ranked opponents. And, maybe the answer is we should stop seeing them that way. Maybe the answer is we should start taking them really seriously because Cal Poly always plays tough games. And so I'll add that little caveat that I don't think there's any shame in that loss because, Cal Poly always just puts up a fight. And there's a few other teams that I could add into that. Long Beach is another one of those teams that like you are in for a tough game and there will be some tricks up their sleeves that will surprise you. But with that being said, there was a lot of good in the Cal Poly game, and I think even though Ellie Walbrook missed her PK, she played great. Hallie Dixon coming off the bench, great. The best game that I have seen her play at BYU was against Cal Poly. The back line really great. Cameron Jorgensen, really great. And so it's unfortunate that they didn't get the result that they wanted. But I think there was so much great play going on in the Cal Poly game that I think a lot of the BYU players just ran with it and said, look, we didn't get the result that we wanted, but there was a lot of good. Some of our players played their best games this season so far. So let's just keep riding that momentum. And I think once the season starts, that's the mentality you have to have. I think preseason and your summer training is when you need to be really critical and really get on players for making mistakes, be really critical of how they're playing, their strategy. But once the season starts, you need to have good, positive vibes. That doesn't mean that you're, aren't working on things and that you're not constructive and finding things to change. But the things you should be fine tuning when the season starts should be things that you can change immediately. It's in preseason and in the springtime that you work on the things that take a long time to develop and get better. And so I think BYU is starting to figure that out. I think they're recognizing that in-season changes are tough. So let's focus on the things that are working. Let's focus on the things that can be changed immediately. And I think that shift in mindset has helped the team bounce back. And let's just keep focusing on what's working, and let's just keep doing that.
Well, and let's just keep focusing on what's in front, because that 1-0 win over UCLA was great, I think, for BYU. It doesn't mean a whole lot if they can't build on it and move forward into it. And this is a very tough, or it's Death Taxes and Jen Rockwood's incredibly difficult non-conference schedules. I think that this BYU team does have moving forward in a lot of ways. The good news is their non-conference road games are behind them. UCLA was the first of 5 consecutive home matches to wrap up non-conference play for the Cougars, which I think is really important. We talked about the advantage that this team gets playing on South Field, that the kind of the ethos, the mythos that this club has built with their home pitch. I think you saw that on Saturday. I think you can see that here down the stretch, because it doesn't really get any easier. Starting this Friday, 7 p.m., we touched on it already. Auburn, SEC foe coming into town, a part of a 2-game swing of SEC opponents that includes next Tuesday, September 2nd, against Arkansas as well. I would much rather, if I'm one of those BYU coaches, have that order, by the way, of Auburn followed by Arkansas rather than the other way around. I think Arkansas is going to be an incredibly difficult opponent. Yeah. Auburn, a team a little bit in transition right now under a first-year head coach as well, but they've got SEC talent, they've got SEC athleticism that I think will test this BYU team. And then they wrap up their home schedule with a pair of in-state rivals, Utah State September 6th, and then Friday, September 12th against crosstown rival Utah Valley as well, which is a fitting end, I think, to non-conference play, because that may be one of their tougher games of this non-conference schedule as well, just for everything around that. In addition to the fact that Chris LeMay has a really good squad a couple miles up the road on University Parkway as well. Carla, we could talk all day about tough non-conference schedules that Jen likes to put together for her BYU teams, but I think we've talked about that enough just over the years. Again, that's nothing new. But what do you want to see about this BYU team, as, again, they don't have to worry about traveling anymore until they get into Big 12 play, but as they wrap up their non-conference schedule with another just absolutely brutal run?
Yeah, I think it's tough with that Arkansas game, but I think BYU needs to close out wins at home. So majority of their home games will actually be in the next month. And so it's interesting. It's actually very rare to have that. I don't know if BYU women's soccer has ever had that, where a majority of their home games, are at the very start of the season. But I think they need to close that out, because once they start traveling, things get hard. It's hard to play away. And so I think BYU can do it. I think that Arkansas, match will be the toughest one at home. That being said, I think BYU can do it. So that's what I would like to see from this BYU team, is can they close out their home games, their home wins, and then that'll put them in a great spot when they start traveling for conference play. And they'll have some intermittent, home games, throughout October too. But this is the stretch, even though it's early in the season, that I think they need to be their most focused. And then I think if they are able to get the results they want, everything else will fall into place to be able to make a deep run and show well in conference play. So again, it's kind of a unique situation. One of the reasons BYU had to always schedule so hard is because they were in a mixed conference. And by mixed, I mean they had some really big, talented teams. You had Santa Clara's and Pepperdines that had high RPIs, but then they were also in a conference with teams that had low RPIs, like Pacific and St. Mary's and San Diego. And so BYU had no choice but to schedule really hard non-conference games as a way to try to help their RPI for the tournament. Now in the Big 12, that's not as much of an issue because a lot of the teams in the Big 12, a majority of them have high RPIs. But I think BYU has found that because it worked so well in the past to increase their RPI and help prepare them for the season, that you might as well keep doing it. And so I think that's why we're consistently seeing, really hard teams in non-conference play. And I think it only helps their RPI. Even had they lost to UCLA, that wasn't going to hurt their RPI at all because UCLA was ranked number 4. And likewise, UCLA, their RPI is not being affected at all either. And so having these really tough games, it's something I want to continue seeing because I think it only helps BYU, even if they take up some losses.
And I'll give a shout out as well to the local college soccer landscape in the state of Utah for kind of beefing up some of those schedules and beefing up in particular BYU's home schedule in a lot of ways, because now you have teams from SEC country, you have West Coast powers like UCLA, you have Kansas is doing this right now, literally as we speak right now. They're willing to come in to the state of Utah for multiple games, multi-game swings, because they know they can get quality opponents, not just with a team like BYU, but Utah Valley's coming up. We're talking about what they did. They were just picked to win the WAC for the fourth season in a row. I think they were picked to win the WAC. Utah State, back-to-back defending Mountain West champions, Utah doing what they're doing, Weber State, Utah Tech, the likes of them are coming up and building their programs in a lot of ways. So you're seeing a lot of these teams that realize, hey, we can take a week and we can take a week, go up to altitude, get some really good competition in a non-conference play, and maybe that can prepare us for an SEC schedule or a Big Ten schedule or even an ACC schedule down the stretch, just because the quality of Utah college soccer right now, I know they're scattered throughout a couple different conferences, but it's so high at the moment. What's that old saying, that a rising tide lifts all boats? And I think we're starting to see that a little bit with scheduling, and particularly home scheduling. It's a little weird. I barely noticed it until you pointed it out, Carla, but it is a little bit weird to see a BYU women's soccer team with 5 straight home games and 5 straight home games against really quality opponents. And I say that literally all 5 of them, not just the SEC teams, not just UCLA, but as good as Utah State is, as good as Utah Valley is. This is a great schedule, one with incredibly tough competition, but I would much rather try to do it at home if I'm BYU than to try to put this together on the road. So kudos to Jen Rockwood and her staff, and kudos to the rest of these clubs for coming in to South and kind of being willing to challenge themselves a little bit early on. I think, just like we talked about with BYU and UCLA, that will bode a lot of really good dividends down the road, being willing to do that. So
yeah.
I
agree. And I think having that Minnesota Cal Poly was a good way to start it too, like on the road. And I apologize. I referred to it as a loss. They tied Cal Poly. I was saying there's no shame in losing to Cal Poly is what I meant.
Sometimes ties feel like losses. It's fine.
But it was a draw, 2-2 draw. But having, I think, those 2 teams on the road was a good way to kind of jump into it as well. And so I think there is a science behind all of the scheduling and preparation. And what's crazy is it has to be done, sometimes a couple of years in advance. And so there is a bit of predictability in preparing for those games.
100%. Absolutely. Next up, we already mentioned it, this Friday, August 29th, 7 p.m., BYU hosting Auburn at South Field, the first of back-to-back SEC opponents. That'll conclude a week from tomorrow, I guess, as of time of recording, Tuesday, September 2nd, against Arkansas. I'm selfishly calling this the Aaron Bailey return game, former BYU winger. Aaron Bailey coming back with her new team in the Hogs, a very good Arkansas team, another top 25 program that I think will probably be the biggest challenge on, at least on this non-conference slate, and maybe the biggest challenge of the entire year. We'll talk about Big 12 play a little bit down the road, but just as a slight teaser, maybe to whet your appetite some, so you guys know how I feel. The Big 12 schedule makers kind of did BYU some favors when it came to putting together their conference schedule this year. So again, we'll talk about that.
Texas Tech.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah, exactly. We'll dive into that a little bit more as the Cougs get closer to conference play, because as always, we're back for season 2. This is more than just a pilot. We have been picked up for a second season. I'm still trying to negotiate the contract to give my esteemed co-host Carla Swensen-Haslam a little bit of a pay raise, but that's coming, Carla. I promise that is coming. We're going to figure that out. I may even double your pay from last year.
It's on the record now.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to make it happen. We're going to make it work. Carla, really do appreciate you joining me for a couple of minutes to talk all things Cougs, talk all things BYU women's soccer. We're going to be back here every week during the season to break down the latest games, win, loss, draw, whatever it may be. Big 12 play. Again, another banger non-conference schedule, some in-state rivalries coming up here. So make sure to follow us at Rock and Royal Pod on Instagram if you want some social media action, at Rock and Royal Pod on YouTube. Now is the official YouTube channel where we will be streaming this in video. And as always, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you download podcasts, we're available at the Rock and Royal Soccer Show. For my co-host, Carla Swensen-Haslam, thank you so much for joining me. This has been Sean Walker saying good night and thanks for all the fans.
The Pac-12 mad, but we still on top, bro. Jaren Harder, Cody X, that's a cool connect.
Yeah, my team is kinda old, but it's cool events.
I'm hitting too hard, ow, I hurt my neck.
Hey, Leak, you good, bro? I'm about to hit up Brad.